time, can we welcome Serena Mitchell?
So, I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and I'm also known as Runes and Roses Storytelling. So, I'm going to tell you 3 stories about a place, a very special place that I found during the pandemic, actually. And it became a sort of a bit of a journey for me that kind of carried me through those dark and difficult times. And some of you may know of this place. In fact, I'm sure some of you have even been there. But before we start, my talks, I like to make them a little bit interactive. I don't know if you're a devout church-going crowd, or if you are heathen and pagan, or if you are none of those things. But does anybody here, can anybody tell me the name of a Sussex saint? Clearly a bunch of heathens. Not one of you could name a Sussex saint. Well, you could have gone for St. Cuthman. You could have gone for St. Wilfrid. You could have gone for St. Richard over in Chichester. But tonight I'm going to tell you the story of Sussex's very own female saint who is long forgotten. And here she is. She's St. Lewina of the 17th century, and talking of virgins, she's celebrated as a virgin martyr saint. I'm also a virgin of the Bar tonight, as some of you are. We're also then going to talk about Nell St. John Montague, a celebrity psychic and actress, and had connections locally, and a Sheela in a gig. So, St. Lewina. Who was St. Lewina? Well, she is the Anglo-Saxon indigenous female saint of Sussex. Here she is in stained glass form, and here is I think it's approximately 1930s, so nearly 100 years old, drawing of St. Lewina. She's very large here, and you can see there's a boat that has sailed over from France. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. That blew off course and is there anchored at Seaford. And the River Ouse, back in the day, over 1,000 years ago, used to come out at Bishopstone. So St. Lewina is the saint of St. Andrew's Church in Bishopstone. Has anybody here been to St. Andrew's? Ah, yes, we have one gentleman. Oh, a few other people, great. And it's a beautiful, beautiful Anglo-Saxon church with a Norman tower nestled in the heart of the South Downs. And as I said, the river used to come out there. Other churches have laid claim to St. Lewina. There's the Church of St. Andrew's in Elphinstone, but archaeology now really points to the fact that she is a saint of St. Andrew's in Bishopstone. And here we are. Here's the church. And the story goes that St. Lewina, we don't know much about her life, apart from an 11th century description by a monk, a Flemish monk called Drogo. And anyway, she was an early Anglo-Saxon saint who died in 670 AD. And we know we're a pagan lot here in Sussex because we were one of the very last counties to become Christianized. But she became a Christian really before St. Wilfrid arrived and converted a lot of the locals. So she was a very early Anglo-Saxon Christian. And we know from archaeological evidence that in this area of Bishopstone there was an Anglo-Saxon community. There was even older Bronze Age burial mound, and this area where the church is built was a pagan burial mound before that. So it's got a lot of ancient history. Now, so she was buried. She was killed. It's likely that she was perhaps struck over the head, as often was the way in those days when people were martyred for their faith. She could have been raped. We just don't know, but we could imagine. She was only a teenager. the story is that she was very devout. And anyway, she died, she was buried, and then people started to go to her graveside because apparently she was a healer from beyond the grave, and people were going to be healed. And after 300 years, they decided to, I think once the church had been made in stone, decided to build a shrine for her. So she was dug up in 980 AD, and her bones were taken into the church. And what's now the church porch is considered to have that's where her shrine would have resided. So that originally was built as a shrine house and not the entrance to the church. Now, what happened to her bones? Because her shrine isn't there, sadly, anymore. So back in, I think, 1058, we have a Flemish monk sailing over to Dover, gets blown off course, lands at Seaford, and here's the story of St. Lewina. So in this period, there's already a big trade going on in Saint's bones, and he's come from this monastery. Here's the ruins of Brugge Monastery over in Flanders, and he thinks, I fancy these bones of this. We could add them to our collection. So he sort of gets in with the church custodian at St Andrews, and he steals St Lewina's bones. But in his haste to get away, he drops some. So apparently there are still fragments of her bones somewhere at St Andrews. Anyway, he takes them back to the monastery at Brugge, and there she gets a new audience. She's forgotten about in Sussex, but her fame rises in Brugge up until the French Revolution, when the monastery gets destroyed, and her bones, along with some other saints, are taken down to the church in Berg, St. Martin's, where they remain. They get forgotten about for another 100 years until the 1920s. And somehow one surviving fragment, I think it might be of a thigh bone, gets brought out, and she's remembered again. But then we come to the Second World War. There's a lot of bombing, and then her relics completely disappear. However, she's not completely forgotten, because the Orthodox Church in Brighton celebrate her feast day on the 24th of July, so not coming up soon. And there's a pub. Do any of you know the Regency Tavern? Yes, great. Well, did you know, up until a few years ago, there was an Orthodox chapel in the cellar of the Regency Tavern, and there is, on their walls, they painted all 4 Sussex saints, including St Lewina. So it's a pub I used to drink in, so I'm quite tempted to see if that mural still exists. So, yes, and she's also celebrated at Nuthurst Church in West Sussex, and here she is, one of the murals of the Saints of Sussex painted there on the rood screen. So what is the legacy of St Lewina today? Well, I think she was a strong woman, a young woman, proud of her faith, wouldn't be druv, as the Sussex saying goes. And I think, she's perhaps can inspire us today, and she's a healer. And if you go to Bishopstone and St Andrew's Church, it really is a very peaceful, healing place, I find. So, coming on to now St John Montagu. She was a celebrity clairvoyant who was born in 1875 in India. Her father was a major general, and she was born Eleanor Lucy Smith, and her father worked in the Madras civil service, and she was brought up, and she had an ayah, she had a nanny, a local nanny, who taught her local magic and local recognized her psychic powers, and gave her, apparently, a crystal ball as a child. And she would be wheeled out at her parents' parties to do psychic readings for their guests. And then she was packed off to boarding school in the UK, And that is when she met, when she obviously was a bit older, met her husband, who was a judge, county judge in Cork in Ireland. So she married and went to live in Ireland and became now Standish Barry. And she had some children with her husband, and then we get to the Second World War. By this time, her husband was well connected in both Irish and British society, and she was quite active in parliamentary circles. She had some very important friends, including the Kissinger. Was it not Kissinger? I'm having a senior moment. Who is the chap on the poster? Britain, Kitchener. Yes, I knew it began with K. So she was friends with Lord Kitchener. Anyway, she predicted a few weeks before he died, and she told him she'd seen his death. And literally, I think within 2 weeks of her making this prediction, his ship, HMS Hampshire, was travelling up the coast of Scotland and was hit by a German torpedo, and he drowned. So from that point, her fame really did take off. And she was doing celebrity readings and clairvoyancy for high society. And she had always had this trademark crystal ball and her head wrap. But sadly, during the First World War, her son died, and she became a healer in a way, because then she gave her house in Ireland over to become a hospital for injured soldiers, and she trained as a nurse. So that's what she did for the rest of the war, I think, to make up for the grief of the loss of her son. So here we are now in the 1920s, and she has become very famous, and she has this pet monkey called Judy that she takes everywhere with her. It's her mascot, and Judy even becomes a bestseller. There's a small toy that you could buy. You could have your very own Judy. And so she's going from strength to strength. And she becomes not only a celebrity clairvoyant, she writes for local papers, she's an author, she writes plays, she acts in her plays, she directs the plays, she becomes a silent movie star. I think this is a still from one of her movie star sort of shots. And yeah, she's highly talented in all these different aspects. And then she writes her own autobiography, which is, I have a copy here. And she also publishes the Red Fortune book, which is also a bestseller, though I don't have the cards that go along with it. Unfortunately, they are lost. But she also has an Eastbourne connection, because the police start using her psychic powers, and she helps solve a very challenging murder mystery. It's called the Eastbourne Crumbles murder. Has anybody heard of the Eastbourne Crumbles murder? Do you remember when it took place? It was I think it was 1934, so before the Second World War. And there had been another murder, another horrific murder, which kind of reminded me of St. Lewina, and how she had a violent death, also had taken place in the 1920s, of a young woman on the same stretch of beach. I think it was between Eastbourne and Pevensey. So then we come to the Second World War, and by this time Nell has become a spy, so they say. And we don't know exactly what she did, because there aren't any detailed records. But what is strange, and this is what points to her most likely have been a spy, is that if you go inside St Andrew's Church, she's there on the War Memorial, and she's there as a civilian. And she had seen, there she is at the bottom, and she is buried in St Andrew's Church. And she had a house in Seaford. She had a house in London and a house in Seaford on the seafront. And she used to attend St Andrew's Church when she was down. But she had foreseen her death in a great fiery red streak. And she died when a Google bug was dropped on her house in London, in Kensington. And that was the end of Now in 1944. But she had a great big funeral and a great big memorial service with loads of dignitaries coming. I think the memorial service was in London, and she was buried by her family as she wished in Eastbourne. So I went to look for Nell's grave, and I couldn't find it. And I looked and I looked and I looked. I'd found St. Louina's shrine, but I couldn't find, and it was totally overgrown. It's in a far corner of the cemetery. It's sort of here, and then you kind of stand by her grave and you're looking up to the church, and it's underneath an old tree, and it was totally covered in weeds, and you couldn't see it because you can see there's no headstone. It's very flat. So I started restoring it, and I go now and I tend it 2 or 3 times a year, and I keep it cut back, and I think she's very deserving of being properly remembered and her grave tended. So finally, we come to the Sheela na gig. Can anybody tell me what a Sheela na gig represents? A demon, possibly. Fertility, yes, I would say fertility rather than, I think a Sheela na gig, as we'll find out, scares demons. Okay, so Bishopstone has its very own Sheela na gig. And it's very worn, she's very worn. And you can see up on the tower, if you've been there, there's a lot of gargoyles and animal heads all on the top of the Norman Tower. And the Sheela na gig is that image of an old crone exposing her genitals in a very bold way. And Bishopstone has its own, it has a pair, and it's quite rare to find Sheela na gigs in a pair. And it's the one on the far left is considered to be the Sheela. She's very weather worn, but if you look closely, you can just about see her sacred channel there. And then she has a partner, and that is said to be the male. And you can see he's got a bit more of a protuberance at the bottom. But Sussex used to have 2 Sheela na gigs, and I'll show you a picture of the other one, and there's a bit of a story to that. But the Sheela na gig was very, very popular in the medieval period. You find her on churches, castles, all over the UK, there are many more in Ireland, and also in parts of France and Spain and even Switzerland. So many people think she was a fertility symbol or protection against the devil. However, somebody didn't like the Sheela na gig in the other Sussex church. Can anybody point out? That's the other Sheela na gig. Does anybody know where that once stood? Well, if you ever go to Buncton Church, which is just by Wiston, at the foot of Chanctonbury Ring, there's again a very simple, very ancient church there, and that's where the other Sheela stood up until 2014, when somebody decided to hack her to bits. And I think that's such a shame, such a wanton piece of violence. Why they'd want to do that, I don't know. But the Sheela gig is having a bit of a revival. Can anybody, for a prize, point out any of the other 3 photographs and what their connection to Sheela's might be? No, okay. I'm not doing very well on the prizes tonight. Well, PJ Harvey, for those of you know, she played recently at Glastonbury. She's a big famous singer now in the UK. One of her very early songs was Sheela in a Gig. Project Sheela in Ireland is dedicated to remembering all the women and children who died or were treated very badly in the Catholic laundries. And then for those of you who know your art of the 1990s, that is Sarah Lucas, and that is her version of a Sheela in a Gig. And the flashing Sheela. I think there's something very powerful about an old woman lifting her skirt. I think she could make a man run a mile. And you can see from this picture here, this drawing from the 1700s, there is a woman lifting her skirt to scare away the devil. And then we go back to ancient Greece and the figure of the Balbo and to the myth of Demeter. And again, we come across another old woman who lifts her skirt to expose herself, to actually make Demeter laugh when she goes into the underworld. And this is all connected to, again, another ancient Greek term, anaserma, which is the very act of lifting your skirt and showing your nakedness. And again, it is considered to be something which is very powerful and a protective symbol. And can anybody name, surely somebody will get a prize, the picture at the top? Beryl Kirk. Who shouted out for? Oh, quick, hands up for a prize. Okay, that lady in the middle. Come and see me afterwards. Beryl Cook, I just love that picture. And then, does anybody, for another prize, can anybody tell me who the co-founders were of the ecosexual movement in 2008? No, okay, well, two women, one of them Annie Sprinkle and her partner, wife, Beth, two American academics, co-founded this movement called ecosexuality, and it's about really kind of making love to the earth and reconnecting with the earth in a sort of very sensual way. And I think a Sheela in a Gig, in this image here of a Sheela, kind of really speaks to that movement. And you can see I've quoted here from the Ecosexual Manifesto. Just Google it. You might find it of interest. You might not. Did anybody here see Peaches play at the at the Winter Gardens as part of the Towner festival last year? No? Okay, well, Peaches is also part of this ecosexual movement. And then we go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, the ancient Mesopotamian myth, and we have Inanna asking the king Damazi to plough her vulva. So it all connects back to the power of the Sheela, and here we have a 17th century painting of the women of Persia scaring their men back into battle because they were willing to give up, and they flashed at them, said, no, 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 back you go to the battlefield, and otherwise we'll be running after you with our skirts around our ears. And so, so here again is another example. And I also very recently, resurrected the power of the Sheela in a Gig, dressed as one on the Restore Nature Now march in London that took place a couple of weeks ago. 60,000 of us walking to preserve nature. So here we have the final slide. The Sheela, the saint, and the psychic. Go and visit St Andrew's Church in Bishopstone. And I'm sorry, Tim, I've overrun. And so anybody have a question quickly?
Well, there we go. Can we thank Serena?